Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to each of you for the work that you do to help keep our homeland safe. Director Wray, are the threats from the domestic violent extremists rising? And if they are they rising based on those that are, if you will, inspired from foreign groups, or are they rising from those that are inspired by domestic groups? Or, and I don't know whether you distinguish that way, but is it on the right? My impression is that it's substantially increasing, but largely domestic. But that may not be the case. So, are the threats greater from these individuals, and by source, domestic or international?
So we would, when it comes to sort of homeland-based terrorist threats, we have two buckets really that we primarily focus on as the highest priority right now. What we call homegrown violent extremists, which is a reference to people here radicalized by foreign terrorist organizations and ideologies. And then domestic violent extremists who are radicalized more by everything from racial animus all the way over to anti-government, anti-authority.
Right.
The first bucket, the homegrown violent extremists, has been humming along fairly consistently at about 1,000 investigations, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less, over the last few years. The domestic violent extremist bucket has been going up quite significantly over the last few years, which is why we're now at 2,700 domestic terrorism investigations, when if you went back 2.5 years ago, we were probably at more about 1,000. So it's been a really significant jump there. We are concerned that with developments in Afghanistan, among other things, that there will be more inspiration to the first bucket as well. So I think we anticipate, unfortunately, growth in both categories as we look ahead over the next couple of years.
Yeah, that is daunting, and we may get a chance to talk about why you might believe that the latter group, the homegrown, domestic-inspired violent extremists, is rising. Secretary Mayorkas, I think any unbiased person would say that the Biden administration's border and immigration policies have been nothing short of a monumental disaster. And were there not so many other disasters that the administration is encountering, it probably would be by itself enough for a government to be hanging on by a thread. We've had our disagreements in the past about how much of the illegal immigration problem is caused by pull versus push factors, and your view that we need to address so-called root causes, which is poverty and corruption in other countries. My view is that we can't solve the problems of the rest of the world. In fact, we can't solve all of our own problems, let alone for the rest of the world. But what we can address are the unnecessary pull factors, if you will, the unnecessary features that we have in place that draw people into coming into our country illegally. And let me just discuss with taxes. If an illegal individual wants to work here and wants to pay U.S. taxes, they're able to do that. Is that right? They're able to do that by getting an identification number. Is that right?
I believe they are, Senator.
Yeah, I think they're called an I-10. They can apply for an I-10. They are able to do so. Under the administration's human infrastructure bill, their children can also get an I-10, can also get that tax number for the same purpose or for whatever purpose they might have.
I don't know the answer to your question, Senator.
The answer is yes, they can. The president's so-called human infrastructure bill also provides $300 per month for every child who obtains such a number. So under the bill that is being proposed and considered by Congress, we will be paying an illegal immigrant $300 per month for each and every one of their children that obtain such a number. So a family of 4 who'd come here illegally would receive as much as $1,200 per month in checks from the U.S. government. Well, of course, well above the wage and the average wage throughout major parts of Latin America. Do you think that this provision, which would allow the children of those that have come here illegally to receive monthly payments, would represent an unfortunate and damaging pull factor that would draw people more and more people into our country illegally?
Senator, I think that speaks to the fact that we have more than 11 million undocumented individuals already present in the United States, a population that has been growing for decades by reason of a broken immigration system. I don't think it speaks to individuals who have not arrived in the United States.
Well, clearly, if there are, if you can get paid $300 per child, even though the child is here illegally and you're here illegally, that's going to encourage people to come here. It also is going to represent a major expense for our government to pay the children of those that are here illegally $300 per month. It's one, it's expensive, and two, it creates a greater draw to come to the country. Director, a question that I'd ask you and perhaps the others as well, which is, it does strike me that three of you all have a very similar responsibility to protect our homeland from violence and extremists of various kinds. Are the lines of responsibility clear as to who is doing what, or do things fall between the cracks? Is there duplication, which is unnecessary? Should we be addressing how we organize this effort? Because I recognize we're asking all three of you very similar questions. You're looking at very similar aspects of the same challenge we have, which is protecting the homeland. Should we rethink how we do this? Are we duplicating the work? Or Director Wray, any one of you could respond to that.
Well, I guess I would speak to it from the perspective of somebody who was heavily involved in this mission on the day of 9/11 and in the first 4 years afterwards, and then coming back from the private sector now. And I think we are well organized against the terrorist threat. We do have, I would view as not overlapping responsibilities, but complementary ones. And I do think that one of the real positive developments learned the hard way from 9/11 is how well we all work together. Our folks in particular work well with other agencies as well on the terrorist threat. And I think there are valuable lessons to be learned from that. Doesn't mean that it can't always be improved. I tend to be dissatisfied by nature. So I expect continued improvement, but I think we're on the right track as far as that goes. And Lord knows we need it, because the threats, as we just discussed, are not getting easier, they're getting harder.
Thank you, Director.
Senator
Chairman.